I even dug out my university textbook. There's a lot of different flies,
Mhm.
loose flies, flesh flies. Then there's the tachinids, the ones I want to talk about. So there's 3 or 4
Mhm.
different types of flies.
Mm.
Most of us know the domestic house fly. The domestic house fly, it likes to eat dead stuff, right? And that's the one we usually find around. There's also the manure flies that like
Mhm.
to eat off the manure. Tonight we're talking about the tachinid flies because earlier this week I did a post about squash vine beetle, right? And somebody was asking about what do the eggs look like because we usually pick the eggs off the plants. They look like copper. Squash vine beetles are coming out right now.
Mhm.
A good way to prevent them, my friend Ivan was saying he burnt all the cucumber vines and the squash vines last year, and he has no squash vine beetle and no cucumber beetles. So they kind of winter in the vines. So you have to get rid of them somehow. The tachinid fly, the fly, a special fly I want to talk about tonight, that's the one that will actually parasitize on squash vine beetle. And the tachinid fly, let me get this. This is the textbook picture.
Yeah.
These ones right here.
How big is that, the size?
They're about the same size as a housefly, a little bit smaller. They're slimmer. They're slimmer. They're not as pudgy. They're not as plump. One of the defining characteristics of the tachinid fly is they have a hairy butt. When you look at them closely, they look like a housefly with a hairy butt. They also have stripes. They tend to have stripes, and it's different shades of blacks and gray. The tachinid flies that are in this area are usually black and gray, and there is actually more precise identification. But the tachinid fly has the most species of all the other flies. Tachinid fly will what you call a generalist predator. They'll eat anything. And they're insectivorous, so they like to eat other bugs. So which is good. So they tend to feed on worms, caterpillars like cabbage worms, gypsy moth, and stuff like that, right?
How about potato bug?
Actually, they do eat
They do?
potato bugs,
Good.
corn earworms, cucumber beetles, cutworms, earwigs, four-line plant bugs, Japanese beetles, Mexican bean beetle, sawfly larvae, and squash bugs. And they will even eat tobacco budworms. So how they do it is they lay their eggs on their predatory insect. When the eggs hatch, they just start eating the bug. And the way it works is they eat the non-essential organs first and then finish off the rest. So they lay a little white egg. You can see it. I don't know if you can see it on the worm larvae there. Sometimes you can see it right on like especially like the cutworms and stuff like that. You can see it right on them. They're not like a potato bug. They don't eat them and chew them right away. And it's not the adults that eat the bugs, it's the larvae that eats the bug. As adults, they feed on nectar. So how do you attract tachinid flies? You plant nectar-loving flowers. And then the adults will come and they'll hang around and lay their eggs. And they like nice smelly flowers like cilantro flower, dill flowers, daisies, chamomile, sweet alyssum.
I remember, your beneficial, the flower raw, it's
Yes,
covered with there are lots of
that one is the one that's in the beneficial row is it's called AMI, AMI, and it's an annual Queen's Anne's lace, and it's non-invasive. Okay, it's not like the native Queen's Anne's lace, which is a perennial here, the wild carrot, right? These tachinid flies, they're good in your squash. They're good in your cabbage patch, right? Or your brassicas, and they're also good in where your cucumbers are. So maybe where you have those species, you should plant something like dill, cilantro, or a beneficial row near it so then they can be attracted to where you want them to lay their eggs, right?
That's
When you look at them from far, they look like a housefly. But when you look at them closer, they kind of have hair sticking up all over their abdomen. They just fly around looking for nectar.
mm,
But then they lay their eggs, and that's where. So even though you're attracting the adults, sometimes it can take a little while before you see the effect of the egg laying, etc., etc. You don't see the instantaneous effect, right? It's a good idea to have, for example, maybe a row of beneficial insect flowers in bloom before you start planting your squash. So then they're already there by the time the squash vine beetle shows up.
it's a fly family, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
the reproduction cycle is very short, isn't it?
7 days, 7 days, yes.
So how early they start coming to the field?
Uh, they usually start coming out in the spring.
So early spring, what kind of flower is good
Daisy.
for daisy? Mm.
They seem to like the flat flowers.
And you all sometimes plant, or quite often, nasturtium between.
Yes.
So are
I
they good?
don't know. Nasturtiums don't have much of a smell. The leaves smell a lot, right? Because the leaves smell like pepper.
That
So
works a
the
different way, yeah.
nasturtiums work as a deterrent
Deterrent, yeah.
for the bad insects, not a
Attract the
beneficial
good one.
attracting
Mm. Mm-hmm.
system. So I have used sweet alyssum in the cucumber family, and it does work.
Mm-hmm.
And I always use dill, cilantro, those kind of herbs in my cabbage
Mm-hmm.
family because they work really well.
You always do the pot, and
Yes, that's
then
correct.
you use as a portable station for them.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And see, you can do that. You can bring these portable insectaries to where you're going to plant your squash and have them there, and then plant a few plants between your plants, right? That's another way of doing it. But there are so many species, they don't know a lot of details about this insect. They know it just likes to eat other bugs, and it seems to work well. It is the only one that seems to be attacking squash vine beetles, so we'll take it. So
Yeah.
this one is kind of a quiet, gentle worker. So they don't create a big or a big draw to it for attention, right? So, and you have to be very observant to find them, and they fly quite fast. And I have seen parasitized larvae before, these eggs on cabbage worms.
Does that parasited worm looks different?
It is very pale,
Pale. Mm.
so it loses all its color, and they will actually pupate in the other insect. So they use the other insect as an extra protection. Well, very efficient. You know, you think about it, you have all this wildlife here in Nova Scotia that has to survive the winters, right? They'll even parasitize at the pupal stage too. Like they're predating the insects
Mm-hmm.
before they get to the adult
Right.
stage, so then they can't lay their eggs and make
Right.
more. So they're in a way efficient that way too, right?
Right.
Probably will see more of them during the fall where they've had a chance to reproduce and reproduce.
Oh, okay.
So you're more likely to observe them and see them in the fall. So what you want to try to do is attract them as early as possible to your garden
Mm-hmm.
because there's always cutworms, there's always those kind of things around.
Mm-hmm. Do they do with the cucumber beetles too?
They will attack
They will
both.
attack them both. Okay, so whatever the bad guys, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
anything you said. They could do anything.
They'll eat anything. They'll eat. They're not fussy eaters.
They're not fussy either. That's good.
The only one that when I was reading, they won't do flea beetles, but that's the only beetle they won't do, and I think it's because they're too small. Right now is the time where the
Mm.
squash bugs are laying their eggs, so you have to look for the eggs, and you have to keep your eye out, because if you just see one or two adults, you just squish them and then you get rid of them. And this would be the time to try to, if you have insect pots, to bring them out in your, to make sure that the tachinid fly is there, ready to pounce on them when they show up, right?
When we talk about the ecosystem and then balance out, that doesn't mean we completely kill everything, but
Right.
we control the outbreak. So
Well, it's about reducing the population to the level that it's manageable. If you
right.
can go out and kill one or two squash bugs, that's easy.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to go and spend 5 or 6 hours, then it becomes a pain in the ass, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same as and a lot of the organic farmers don't have time to pick the bugs. So how do you deal with it? And the squash bug is actually resistant to pesticides. So if you want to spray them, a lot of pesticides don't work. And there are squash bugs that are pesticide resistant in the valley. I'm assuming it will come this way too. So it's a very hard one to control at the best of time.
The key is a control, not to eliminate. Yes.
Yeah. Proper crop rotation is a good way of controlling it.
Mm-hmm.
Cleaning the debris is another good way of controlling it, right?
Yeah.
So if you clean the debris and reduce the population, and then you have, lots of Queen's Anne's lace growing in your yard and a lot of little things like that happening, then you have the tachinid flies. So even if there is a one or two squash vine beetle that survive, the damage is minimal, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what you want to do, is minimize the damage, right?
Yeah.
So, and just so you know, there are different varieties of squash that are squash vine beetle resistant. So the butternut, the Hubbard,
delicata as well.
Delicata too.
Yeah, you have them. Selecting the right plants for your garden is the first step, right? To avoid the unnecessary trouble. That's right.
Well, it's about being proactive, not reactive, right? Mm-hmm. Next time you go around in the garden and you look all over the place and you see that there's a lot of flies on the flowers, take a closer look. Half of the time it's the tachinid fly. Mm-hmm. The adult of the tachinid fly has to eat pollen and nectar. So
they're pollinator as well, basically.
So it's a pollinator. Yeah. So it's a 2-for-1, really.
Sometimes the color attracts certain ones, but
these guys seem to be attracted by smell. They're in the fly family, and flies like smell, but these ones like the sweet smell. So unlike a housefly that is attracted to rotten smell, this fly is attracted to pretty sweet smells.
That's nice. Very nice. Yeah.
Well, see, if you have the space, you can plant a perennial garden that would be a good habitat for these beneficial insects to overwinter near your vegetable garden. So then there's always a space for them there.
Right. You have quite a few around. Yeah.
That's correct. Right. So, and if you need a questions answered, you can send me email message on Facebook or whatever, and you or leave me a message on the telephone. We try to, like when these questions are asked, we try to address the issues on Facebook and stuff, so everybody gets a chance to learn. Right?
Yeah, I learn a lot by asking questions. Yeah.